Everybody, this is Christian Buckley and another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm here with David Pine, and we're talking about technology in a different area. David, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll jump into some topic areas.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Christian. My name is David Pine. I'm a technical evangelist in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've been in tech for 8 years. I know Christian just shared with me earlier that he's been in tech for like 30, so that's super intimidating to hear. Yeah, I work as a consultant now. Before that, I did a bunch of kind of full-time and employment stuff, working all the way back in web forms and win forms, and now I've been evangelizing around the latest and greatest technologies from Microsoft, things that are really getting me excited. So there's been, I've been following the language progression for C#, so I like, presenting on stuff like that, touching on TypeScript, even though it's not really new, it's still advancing and it's an innovation for the web, innovation on JavaScript itself, so applying types to JavaScript. I've been most interested recently in WebAssembly and Microsoft's view of the world with their experimental framework, Blazor, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, and I had mentioned, so I'm not familiar with that, and haven't heard of that acronym or that name, that product name. One thing before we get started, though, I have to ask. I mean, so you're based in that part of the world. I'm assuming that you're a fan. You're required to live in the state to be a Laverne and Shirley fan, right?
Not necessarily.
I'm just dating myself there.
Right. I was going to go Google that with Bing real quick and see if I can find out who that was.
Yeah, no. I'm not so much a Laverne and Shirley as like folks that know, it's like in the know. I mean, as a Lenny and Squiggy fan. So, but anyway, yeah. So with Build just having passed, and there were some announcements around that, and so what were kind of your takeaways from the announcements made?
In all honesty, I wasn't able to attend Build, which is unfortunate. I was there, I think either the year before or the one before that. But I was at the MVP Summit, so I got, kind of insider information before a lot of the big announcements.
And I know, but they do like to hold things out, even from the MVPs. They'll even, sometimes they'll tease us and say, and then there's something, right, we're going to wait and we'll tell you at Build. It's like, come on.
Right, yeah. So I've been trying to find time to go look and watch some of the on-demand announcements. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter and blogs, and there's ML.net, so machine-learning.net, mm-hmm, which looks pretty promising, right? But yeah, so I haven't had time to go look and invest in some of those areas. So I've been preoccupied with work things and stuff like that. But yeah.
Well, so I know you're doing a lot of presenting. So what kind of events and stuff are you speaking at more recently?
I just, a couple weeks ago, I just got back from my first ever international speaking engagement.
Oh, wow. Where'd you go?
I was in Serbia, and I was there for IT Connect, so Eastern Europe, and it was a great event. I've been on a few webcasts, I think, since then, and I've shared some of the story, but to share it for others, they had 3 major cities that they traveled to for this conference, and it was basically over the span of like 7 or 8 days. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. I got to do the same talk. I was talking about what's new in C#, so sharing all the new language features. And C# is something that I've kind of built my career around. It's a language that I've grown to love, and I taught myself C#. Ironically, I started off with probably a standard progression, but Visual Basic, and even before that, Java. So it was an amazing event. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, so what are the cities? So I know there was a huge event, SharePoint Office 365 World, that was in Zagreb that's now moved over to Germany this year. I'm really kind of upset because I really wanted to go to that event, and it's a past location. Just beautiful photos from that part of the world, and I've never been to that part of the world.
I'll have to share some photos. I had a similar sounding experience. I was in Belgrade, which is the capital, and then we drove south to Niš. And then we went past Belgrade, northwest towards Novi Sad. So the three most heavily populated cities within or within Serbia.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of neat. I've never been out of the country before that. So this was my first time ever leaving the country. So it was like super intimidating, and nerves were getting at me, but it was so much fun.
What not to Canada? You're close to the border. You've not been to Canada?
Never been to Canada. Hey, I'm from Wisconsin, so we're close enough, right?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun.
Well, that's great. Yeah. So what have been some of the changes? What are some of the noticeable differences?
So the language is really trending towards becoming more and more expressive. So you can do more by actually saying less. So less actual code to do similar things. So there was
so that sounds very Orwellian. It's now just double plus good, and
yeah. So the language itself, though, is really, really cool. It's been advancing, and they just keep progressing. I think Microsoft's done a really cool thing with making it open source, right? So I get to see the inner workings. I get to sit here and watch issues and other people contribute to it. I get to watch the pull request, the whole life cycle for the GitHub workflow, and it's really, really powerful, and it's super cool to kind of see like within this black box and actually be able to interact with the people that are developing it, and even get to the point where you're potentially influencing the design language, or there's a team for the language itself that has like design sessions and whatnot. So like being able to be just like a part of that or even observe it from afar is just really, really cool.
So a lot of that interaction, I mean, we talk a lot about, in different parts of the ecosystem that are very much Microsoft folks in the community are involved, like through the Microsoft Tech community. Of course, you mentioned, GitHub, and Microsoft has spent a lot of time, made a lot of effort and investments over in GitHub. And I think just in general, communicating with Microsoft and part of it has come through their opening up and working with open source communities, but that they, and I know it's true for a lot of different product teams where they're now also measured on their level of community involvement and activity. And so I always tell people, like, the secret to working with Microsoft is, identify the right people that you need to work with and understand their commitments. Because and a lot of large organizations are like this, where you have every employee has their annual commitments, which rolls up to the team level, and all of those teams roll up to the division, which roll up to the business, and kind of all the way up to the top, so that you as an individual, what you need to deliver in that year, which is then broken down by quarter and month and, and so forth. But how you then impact what Microsoft as a whole is trying to achieve. And so if you understand that about the person you're trying to work with, and especially as like a partner, as an MVP, we have this, it's when we understand that, the conversation then with that individual, you're trying to get their attention about something. If hey, listen, I'm working on something, can help you meet or exceed your annual commitments on this point, be like, they will listen, they'll be responsive.
Right.
But anyway, that's sorry, I tend to soapbox on things like that, but it's
no, that's cool. Some of those bits you just talked about, I wasn't even familiar with some of the hierarchy and the goals and stuff like that, and that's really cool. And
so if you understand like that and are interacting with somebody and say, hey, look, this helps solve this problem. I know that you're being measured on this. It's amazing how that works, but it's true. So.
And I think it's interesting, like they try to do all these different things, like even within Visual Studio itself, there's like this feedback feature where you can submit, issues or things, a typical developer would gripe about. So rather than griping about it, you can submit an issue to them. But I find it surprising that not a lot of people actually use that sort of thing. So it's like, why complain about it when they're giving you a mechanism to try to make it better, to help them help you? Like, don't.
Exactly. It's funny. We would a couple of years back and made it, I don't drink, but was like a drinking game. I'd sit there with the soda or whatever. And every time somebody would say the word, and a couple of years back, it was the word telemetry. And anytime we're watching, you know, some Microsoft conference and somebody mentions telemetry, everybody's like, yeah.
So then you end up getting really, really caffeinated, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that for me, yes. But the fact that while we joke about that, but how much, you know, Microsoft, the big shift, and really when Satya came on board was around looking at the data and having, you know, like data scientists and things that have been, you know, building up as a profile inside of Microsoft. But looking at on a product and a team level, looking at all that data. Well, to your point, if you're not collecting data, meaning people are not submitting feedback, you can't then go and improve. And even in we always talk about user voice. So user voice is something that I look in at least once a week, if not more, where if I see an issue or a conversation, I want to know, hey, this is something, this feature request, or somebody like over there, like what's happening around that, and go and start investigating. That's one place I go and look to find out, hey, is this something that Microsoft already has in the roadmap, already addressed? Is it brand new? And most people are surprised to learn how few votes that you need in user voice for Microsoft to then go in and respond and to address that, to provide feedback that, hey, this is on the roadmap already, or, you know, it's not, we weren't aware of it, or, you know, or, hey, we don't care about this. They never say that. Right.
They never say that. So how many votes? I'm curious now.
It's as few as 5.
Really? So why not respond to this?
I've heard other numbers, but I've heard, you know, 5 from folks. But and so maybe there's some variance, but it's very low. And so it seems like you as an individual could go in and vote for that, immediately go post it out on GitHub somewhere on, you know, within some community site like Microsoft Tech Community, and say, hey, people, please, here's the link, go vote for this that I just submitted, and Microsoft will respond. It's very low bar to get Microsoft to be responsive to those things, which is great to see.
Yeah, a lot of times I just leverage the MVP card and I'll go directly to individuals on the product team that I know personally.
Right.
So I'll you know, direct message them on Twitter, or I have some of their cell phone numbers. I'll just, you know, text them and annoy them that way, right?
Well, there's a, hey, look, you know, it's a benefit for being in the program is to have that level of access. In fact, I would say that's probably the biggest benefit of being an MVP. However, I would say to people that are not MVPs is that's why it's good to get to know your local, regional, or favorite MVP. You know, in this world that we live in, it's so small now. Anyway, whoever your favorite MVP is, that is you've been able to connect with or reach out to MVP. But that's another route to talk to your MVP. It's like, hey, are you aware of this issue? Or you've blogged about this. Right. Here's my experience. If you need, I would love to get your help in getting more visibility in with Microsoft. And that should definitely be a strategy if you have found something that's become a roadblock.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I agree with that 100%. And it's funny you bring up the community and like as it pertains to MVPs specifically, I've been receiving a lot of questions from friends that aren't MVPs, for example, and they keep asking me like, how do I become an MVP? So I wrote this blog post, like literally, I think it was earlier this week or a couple weeks, or
Okay, so you have to send me the link to that, and I'll include it in the write-up.
Yeah, definitely, we'll do that. But it's catching fire on Twitter. It's already got like 13,000 impressions, and it's been retweeted, and liked a bunch. And
so what's your secret sauce? So I mean, most MVPs have written a similar blog post around it. So kind of what's your guidance to people? How do they become an MVP?
Well, my guidance is not to try to become an MVP. And I hear a lot of people say that, right? I know that at first when I was trying to become an MVP, I put too much effort into focusing on becoming an MVP rather than the gratification of giving back to the community. And that's what it's really about, right? Being passionate and doing what you love and then letting things happen naturally, so to speak. So there's people that have a goal to be an MVP, and it's almost like as soon as you quit that goal and you start doing the things that really matter to you, and you're able to have a positive series of community facing activities, contributions, so to speak. That's when it's going to happen, right? And so I do a lot of different things. So I do blogging, I do speaking. I think last year I gave 22 talks. I blogged probably a dozen or so times on different mediums. And then I do open source, so I contribute to that. And then I was last year and the year before kind of answering questions on Stack Overflow. I've kind of since pulled away from that a little bit. And then I organize a technical conference here in Milwaukee. So it's like all these different things, and I do mentoring. So it's, and it's things that I'm all passionate about, right? So it's not like I'm trying to make it like this huge effort that I need to go have all these check boxes. It's more so I love being a part of the developer community. I love being able to share knowledge. And as a result of that, Microsoft recognizes me as an MVP.
There's and that's great. I agree with all that 100%. It's and I often would tell people, I said before I became an MVP back in January 2012, and I lived and breathed this way. I've always been this way. I've been in other communities in the past. I've been an entrepreneur for a number of years, and I've started and run user groups and a couple different nonprofits and a lot that are community focused and always in tech. And I said, this is who I am, the way that I do things. And if I were to lose my MVP, because it's increasingly competitive. There's a lot of people that are finally figuring out that, that community is not always about like what you get out of it. There's just the goodwill that's created just by participating, that you don't always have to get something for you out of the interactions that helping other people. There's the benefits that, the just feeling good about that, helping people, that aspect of it. But I would always tell people that even if I lost my MVP, I was like, I'm going to continue doing what I do because it's who I am.
Exactly. And that's what it is for me. And I feel the exact same way. Like, I remember when I first got awarded, I had, the timing was perfect, right? Like I had submitted one of my, I submitted a contribution just to update my profile. And I went to check my email to make sure that it had been received. And then instead I was getting the, you've been awarded email. So I was like, wait a second. It like caught me totally off guard because I was expecting a different email, right? That I had received confirmation. It's like, you're an MVP now. I'm like, oh my God. But then it's like, I was telling people about, the benefits, right? Like the different things that you had touched on a little bit, but everyone like initially thinks like, oh, there's no like monetary thing. You're not getting paid. You don't get like all this, whatever. It's like, no, they're just recognizing us as people who love the community and just so happen to be passionate about certain technologies.
Not that we would turn it down if Microsoft is if Bill Gates came forward and said $1 million to every MVP, I would be supportive of that. I'm willing to trial it. In fact, you and I can be pilot.
Right. Yeah, I'll even split that, right?
Look at the effects. Interview us before the $1 million and after the $1 million, like a year later, and see if it changed anything about us. I don't think it would change anything about me. So I'm willing to. But it
would be a lot more competitive, though, maybe, right?
But let's gather some data around that. That's why I'm willing to pilot this out. I'll submit an email later. So.
Yeah, be sure to CC me on that. I'm curious.
No, but but you're right. It's so there's a great story. I'm going to throw his name in here. He won't mind, but good friend of mine. Eric Overfield. I'll embarrass him a little. So Eric has now been, for a handful of years, been an MVP, but he also a year ago was made a Microsoft Regional Director, which is a very select group. I just got my in RD. I think there's under 175 of us or something like that around the world kind of thing. And it's different than an MVP. And if you're wondering what it is, go to rd.microsoft.com and there's some description around that. You can do the same around mvp.microsoft.com and get more information about that program. Because you can submit your own name and things out there. So Eric is a perfect example of that, where here's a guy who I met through doing community activities. I had helped launch several SharePoint Saturday events on the western coast of the U.S. And so I ran one in the San Francisco Bay Area, which I was born and raised, and wanted to bring something back to that area. And I also started one in Sacramento. And the East Bay got moved over to Silicon Valley, and I brought, paired up with Eric to co-run the Silicon Valley events and the Sacramento events, and then handed off. He took them over and ran them. But so he came and said, hey, it's a goal of mine to be an MVP. And I'm like, you're doing all the stuff. I mean, you're CEO of a company, you're helping customers, you're running these events, you're doing the user groups and breakfast meetings. You're one of the guys that is just never seems to sleep. If somebody has a question and they reach out to you, you try to help them, and end to end. If you don't know the answer, hand them off. And are you getting the response? Like, that's just who he is. And but he just, like, no traction, was a bunch of us kind of submitted and what's going on. And so after like a year or two, and I remember seeing him at an event on the East Coast, and he's like, hey, just want to know. He says, I've just kind of let go of that. I don't care. I said, I've had so many benefits that have come from just doing this stuff for the community. I don't need to have the recognition. And it's funny that he said that, and like a month later, he gets out of the blue, the letter.
Right.
So it is, I have to say that I know a lot of Microsoft people that have told me that they are aware of people that are doing it for the wrong reasons, that are trying to go and do that versus just being there. There's a difference.
Right.
And to say that, for Microsoft, when they go and investigate, I mean, some of the things that they do, they talk to members of the community. They talk to other MVPs. And
you might say that they're potentially leveraging like machine learning or cognitive services.
Right. We're all robots, and we're sharing our learning. But yeah, so I mean, that does play into it. And so and like, if I don't remember ever providing that feedback about any prospective MVP that, no, I think they're doing it for the wrong reason. I generally want to be supportive of that. As my feeling is that, hey, whether they're doing it for the wrong reasons or not, if they're doing it to the level of activity that's supporting the community, it's still supporting the community. They're still doing it, but it's up to Microsoft at the end of the day who they award and for what their reasoning is. But the vast majority of MVPs are not narcissists doing it because they like to talk up front. They just are like us, that just love that feeling of, I had this learning, I had this guidance, I had this experience, I was able to share that with people.
Right.
And that drives a lot of who we are.
Exactly. Well said.
No, thank you. So I think we're done. No. So let me ask you one other question. So at the beginning, so you talked about one thing I talked about that acronym, or that like I wasn't familiar with.
Blazor.
Yeah. So what is that?
So Blazor is a web framework technology. It's supposed to be like a complement to SPA, so single page applications. If you're familiar with ASP.NET and ASP.NET web forms, historically it was this server-side rendering of your HTML and then serving that to client browser, right? So SPAs are you get a lot of what's required, the bits for the application itself up front. Mm-hmm. So there's an initial cost of that initial download of all the JavaScript, for example, right?
Right.
And then you make lightweight API calls to get the data and manipulate state. But you have like a client side routing and all these niceties of having kind of your business logic built out on a client side app.
Right.
So that's a SPA. And historically that's been done with JavaScript, right? Mm-hmm. So now WebAssembly has been standardized, and as a result of that, that means that all four major browsers support WebAssembly. So WebAssembly basically is running, they call them quote unquote higher level languages like C++, C, Rust, stuff like that in the browser itself, right? So rather than JavaScript, you can take these higher level languages and execute those. They're compiled down to run within that kind of virtual machine or sandbox, right?
Right.
So now what they've been doing with this experiment called Blazor is doing the same thing, but with C#. So you can take C#, compile it down to a compatible format that will then execute and target and run against WebAssembly on a client browser. So if you actually open up your network tab, for example, rather than seeing JavaScript files and CSS, well, you'll still get CSS and HTML, but rather than seeing JavaScript files, you'll be seeing DLLs come over the wire.
Very cool. So that is, so how I, as the non-dev, but translate a lot of that. I mean, so I have a history in telecom and building out some, in collaboration technology, especially, but this whole concept of, we dealt with back in 2000, 2001, I started working with vendors around like WAN optimization and trying to solve some of the problems of server-side code and being accessed through sometimes very limited pipe. And when you have customers, especially I was working in supply chain world where you have tier 2, tier 3 small vendor suppliers that were sometimes on a dial-up connection in Malaysia, for example, and couldn't do like these high bandwidth. Of course, there was very few people had, even businesses, high bandwidth connections in the internet back in 2000, 2004, that era. And so we started to develop like edge devices. And now we've got, so you see a lot of that. I mean, even my camera here, my Logitech has, from a hardware firmware perspective, has processing that's done there rather than having to go and process it out in the cloud and send back, so that it's much faster and performant for live streams and other things. Similarly, a lot of these kind of edge services work in that same way. I mean, it's just that's how I'm translating it in my brain, like kind of how that works. But it's changing where some of the work is done to increase the performance and speed of delivery.
There's definitely, exactly. There's definitely performance benefits to it. It's getting more closer to, machine level optimizations in terms of how things are going to be executed, right? So rather than having various levels of abstractions where you're running on JavaScript, and I'm still building on a talk for it, so I might be technically inaccurate with some of these things, but it's a lot lower level. Obviously they get to quicker speed, right? So it's a lot more optimal for stuff like that. So
what's interesting too is that the systems, and this is how spent a few years working in kind of the grid technology space, is a lot of what I thought was the most exciting advances in that was not the hardware components of grid, that concept of server grids and that kind of thing, but was the software that was optimizing between those, and to be able to make decisions based on the calls that were being made, the APIs accessed, where it needs to process, what needs to work, and where's the most efficient place to go and do that, whether it's locally on the machine that's calling down these things, or somewhere else and serving up the results of that. And so I see so much of what we're seeing, whether it's at the coding level, if it's where, how we're developing applications in even technology like blockchain, where it's all these same, it's the new waves of what we were working on in the 90s and early 2000s to solve these kinds of supply chain problems.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. For Blazor specifically, it really threw me off because I've been doing a lot of like Angular development, right? So they have an HTTP client, which is obviously JavaScript based, and it makes API calls back out to your web server or to a web server. And now with Blazor, I'm using the C# .NET HTTP client on the client itself, which is just crazy. Like when you really sit back and think about it, because historically the HTTP client was used exclusively like server code, right? To make remote calls and then feedback data potentially to somewhere else. But now it's actually executing on the client, kind of taking the place of these other, HTTP, invocations. And it's kind of wild to wrap your head around.
Yeah, you're right. There is so much. We always talk about whatever the technology area it is, it's one human being it's impossible for them to keep up with everything that's happening. There's so much rapid change, advances that are coming on so many different fronts. And this is one I've just not even, thought in depth around, as I think about the various services that I work with, and it's more on the, the IT pro and power user side of things, the world more of that I live in. But it's, there's just foundational changes, improvements that are going on as well. That's, it's an exciting time for tech in general.
It definitely is. Yeah, I was part of a Twitter storm. I'm not super big on Twitter, but last night my phone would not stop buzzing. There was
you can change those settings, Yeah.
Yeah, I'm well aware. People have commented on that, but someone specifically was asking for like who to follow in the Midwest, and my handle was mentioned by someone, and then of course everyone that was mentioned there, they shared a bunch of people, and then they started sharing a bunch of people, and it went viral, right? Like it was just the entire Midwest now has a list of like who to follow and who's influencers in that space. And
there's a logical next step. You're going to have stalkers. So good for you.
Well, you're assuming I might not have already had stalkers.
That's true. I'm sorry. My mistake. Yeah. So, well, very cool. Well, it's, I know, look, there's a lot of, subtopics that we can, dive into here, but to wrap up, like, David, how can people get in touch with you? Where are you usually blogging, and what's the best way to reach out to you?
Sure. Yeah. My blog is davidpine.net. On that, I have obviously a blog page, but then I have a bunch of other pages, which are, I believe, to be entertaining. It's got my speaking schedule, as well as a bunch of other pictures from various conferences and whatnot. In addition to that, you can follow me on Twitter at davidpine7. I guest blog on .NET Curry quite a bit. I also have at davidpine7 for medium.com, and Stack Overflow, David-Pine, and my GitHub is Evangelist.
Awesome. Well, I'll provide links to all those things in the summary blog post as well, which you'll find out on buckleyplanet.com. And other than that, David, thanks a lot for your time today. It's great to, again, get to know an MVP in a completely different arena as that which I work on a day-to-day, and great to get to know you. And I'm hopefully we can connect soon. I'm looking for speakers for something right now, which might actually be up your alley, but
yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm looking for speakers as well. So the conference I run here is creamcitycode.com. So yeah, we're looking for RCFPs open, and well, thank you for having me on, Christian. This is awesome. I really appreciate everything that you're doing for the community, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Well, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.